Each presidential administration features a pendulum swing on some of the most important issues in our culture. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. The White House issued a series of documents for International Transgender Day of Visibility. Even more than revealing a new progressive baseline when it comes to politics and gender, these documents foreshadow new and real threats to religious freedom. For example, a statement from the Office of Population Affairs, yes, that's what it's called, claimed that so-called gender-affirming treatment, quote, improves the mental health and overall well-being of gender-diverse children and adolescents. Now, in this case, gender-affirming means to actually encourage grade school children to question their gender. And when they do, to provide them with puberty blockers and hormone therapy to help them reject their gender and their bodies. In some cases, the document says, adolescents should even have access to so-called gender-affirming surgery, a procedure which either removes or destroys perfectly healthy body parts and is irreversible. Well, in recent months, states such as Texas and Florida have taken steps to prevent children from being subjected to such mental and physical harm. However, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, an entity of the Department of Health and Human Services, also issued a release proclaiming that, quote, gender-affirming care is neither child maltreatment nor malpractice. Around the same time, the Department of Justice, yes, the Department of Justice, sent a letter to all state attorneys general saying that opposing HHS guidance is discrimination and is essentially an attack against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, non-binary, or otherwise gender non-conforming people, and that such actions may be unconstitutional. Again, that came from the Department of Justice. Now, to top it all off, President Biden himself issued a video in which he spoke specifically to parents, insisting that, quote, affirming their child's identity is one of the most powerful things they can do to keep them safe and healthy. In it, in which he was essentially telling parents how to parent, he appealed to biblical language, misguidedly conflating the image of God with the confusion of gender dysphoria. It's not just that the government's claims fail to match reality. It's not just that their talking points are crafted from data using flawed research methodology. It's not even that their appeals to so-called settled science are clearly premature. Transgender ideology falsely promises hope to very vulnerable people, especially children, and instead brings harm to people who bear God's image. When government forces and federal departments are co-opted to advance this ideology, well, religious freedom is then placed in a precarious and fragile position. Years ago, during the Obama administration, Chuck Colson began to notice how then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and other officials began to use the language of freedom to worship instead of freedom of religion. As he said at the time, freedom to worship is a narrowing of religious freedom away from public expression toward only private conviction. It's a major loss if religious freedom no longer includes the right to order our lives around our deeply held religious beliefs, but includes only the right to believe in one's own heart, one's own head, one's own home, and one's own house of worship. The recent documents and proclamations from the Biden administration assume that understanding of religious conviction, while also establishing a new baseline, a new extreme baseline for political enforcement of the sexual revolution. The statements and letters that were issued frame all opposition to the state's view of sexual orientation and gender identity as an intent to harm and to discriminate. Now, procedurally, this is how we can expect federal departments like Health and Human Services to operate. Each new administration will spend a year and a half dismantling the rules and regulations of the previous one, while planning new ways to implement new rules in ways that make them more difficult to dismantle by the next administration. The Obama administration did this. The Trump administration did this. Now the Biden administration is doing it. These recent documents, proclamations, and videos indicate that the rules coming out of the Departments of Health and Human Services and Education and others will be the most extreme yet. Even so, Christians in this cultural moment should not buy that these beliefs are inevitable. We should not abandon truths about the human person, about sexuality, and about religious freedom each time a new administration roars. with clarity and with courage. We have to teach our kids. We have to build our institutions, and we have to take all necessary stands based on what is true. What is true about men and women? What is true about sex? What is true about marriage? What is true about freedom? Connecting what is eternally true to the challenges of the cultural moment is what the Colson Fellows program is really all about. In May, over 700 leaders of churches, homes, institutions, businesses, and communities will be commissioned, having spent the last year studying worldview and theology, having wrestled with the challenges of the cultural moment, and having planned on how to implement what they've learned as Christians of influence where God has placed them. There are now Colson Fellow cohorts in over 60 cities and now in over 28 churches across America, as well as online cohorts for others. Come to colsonfellows.org to learn more about this program and to apply for the next class. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.